15 months after our first WGN Investigates report on questionable spending by South Suburban politician Tiffany Henyard, it appears she has been forced off the ballot.
Thornton Township Supervisor Tiffany Henyard, who was appointed to that position tonight, lost her bid for the Democratic Party's nomination in this rare...
Renowned for her inflated persona and self-proclaimed title of super mayor, controversial politician Tiffany Henyard is battling valiantly to hold onto her power in Thornton Township and Dalton, Illinois. She is currently involved in yet another scandal, this time over her exclusion from the Democratic ballot for allegations of election interference, voter suppression, corruption, and even litigation are being directed at the town supervisor. Although the fallout has been nothing short of explosive, is this the story of a political figure fighting for justice? Or is it a desperate attempt to maintain power in the face of mounting criticism and controversy?
7 minutes. That's all it took for Tiffany Henyard to be out as the Democratic nominee for Thornton Township Supervisor, and she left here visibly upset.
For the first time in more than 30 years, a contentious decision made by state senator and township Democratic committeeman Napoleon Harris rocked local politics and created the conditions for unheard of drama. Both supporters and detractors conjectured that Harris' decision to organize a caucus rather than a primary election to decide which candidates would be on the ballot was a calculated attempt to obstruct Tiffany Henyard's path to the nomination. That this move was deliberately designed to tip the scales against Henyard, and based on the results, her name was noticeably missing from the Democratic ballot for the next election. The main reason given for her disqualification was that she had failed to include a certified assessor on her ballot, a technicality that allowed Harris to completely reject her candidacy. Harris and his own group of candidates capitalized on this error and made sure that his faction won the award after dominating the caucus. Harris' decision to choose a caucus over the traditional primary process ignited intense discussions in the community about fairness, procedural integrity, and the reasons behind his choice. While some saw this as a valid use of procedural tools to uphold the standards of candidature, others denounced it as a calculated power grab intended to secure the Democratic nomination for the April election. Diminish Henyard's impact and thwart her goals, the consequences of this choice were felt well beyond the caucus hall, sparking heated discussions among party members and locals about the process's validity and the implications for local democracy amid charges of political sabotage. Harris' actions, according to Henyard and her allies, are a blatant attempt to subvert her leadership and seize power for his own political purposes. Harris and his supporters insist that the caucus was held in compliance with Democratic Party guidelines and was an essential step in restoring legitimacy and order to local government in the face of heightened emotions. In addition to altering the electoral landscape, this divisive occurrence has further polarized and divided the community, raising long-lasting concerns about the distribution of power and responsibility in local politics. Tension reached its peak when Tiffany Henyard, visibly furious, stormed out of the caucus meeting and hurled sharp accusations at Napoleon Harris and his allies, whom she charged with orchestrating a coup to sabotage her political career. Tiffany's response to being disqualified from the caucus was nothing short of explosive, marking a dramatic escalation in what was already a highly contentious political saga. Her voice echoed with outrage as she reportedly declared this is election rigging at its finest, denouncing the process as not. The attempt to discredit her and deny her followers the right to vote is not only unlawful, but also blatant. According to Henyard, the caucus was a charade designed to remove her from the contest and stifle her constituents' desire. Her base found great resonance in her portrayal of Harris's actions as deliberate and undemocratic, arguing that the arrangement was a blatant power grab that made fun of the political process. Her exclusion was perceived as a glaring injustice, and she didn't stop at words. In vehement speeches and interviews, she made it obvious that she would not take the alleged offense lying down and declared her intention to sue all parties involved in what she called a flagrant breach of democratic values. In addition to being a personal slight, Her promise to suit turned into a rallying cry for her supporters, intensifying the controversy and further dividing the town. For Henyard, this was a fight for her political survival and a campaign against what she portrayed as a corrupt system. Working against the interests of the people, her disqualification and subsequent outbursts have become central issues in the election drama that is currently playing out, igniting intense debate over the process's integrity and transparency. Critics claim that Henyard's removal from the ballot was justified because she did not present a certified assessor on her slate, while her supporters maintain that Harris's move was merely a calculated move to consolidate power and crush opposition. But Henyard's defiance has only strengthened her resolve. She has positioned herself as a champion of democracy, vowing to uncover what she says is widespread corruption and election malpractice. Her ferocious speech and unrelenting commitment have energized her base. While opponents claim she is more concerned with protecting herself than helping the community, the issues surrounding her has only served to widen the township's already existing rifts, with people strongly divided between those who see Henyard as a victim of political manipulation and those who view her as an opportunist who refuses to take responsibility. The legal battles Henyard has promised to start have the potential to further destabilize the township and impede progress on urgent community issues, but she maintains that these battles are essential to upholding the principles of justice and fairness. Her speeches continue to inspire supporters who see her as a fearless leader opposing a raid system, and her determination to fight back has ensured. It is unclear whether her legal maneuvers and outspoken defiance will eventually put her back in the race or further alienate her detractors, but what is certain is that Henyard's explosive reaction to her disqualification has turned this local election into a high-stakes political showdown, highlighting her refusal to fade quietly and her political future. She is still the center of attention for Henyard, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Willingness to fight the current quo at any cost as the issues of justice, power, and democracy are revealed in the saga. More significant than before, guaranteeing that this pivotal period in Henyard's career would continue to be remembered as a turning point in the township's political history.
If they could beat me, they would have went to the polls. But now when I bring the people out, you don't let them.
The entire process has been clouded by allegations of ballot suppression and dubious tactics, which led to complete mayhem during the caucus at the Homewood Flossmoor Park District Auditorium. Tiffany Henyard, the beleaguered central figure, claims that the event, which was supposed to be a pivotal moment in deciding Thoron Township's political future, turned into a divisive and controversial show. In this drama, the mayhem started well before the event even got underway. According to Henyard, hundreds of her followers were denied the opportunity to participate and were made to wait outside the venue in bitter cold. With the fleet of buses transporting elders and other community members, she personally arranged transportation for many of these supporters, some of whom were elderly, who had traveled great distances to attend the caucus. Members reportedly arrived a little late, but rather than being given access or accommodations to make their voices heard, the attendees were turned away at the doors. Henyard described the entry restrictions as draconian, stating that even those who were able to approach the venue were met with dismissal. This effectively excluded the seniors from the process, leaving them stranded outside in the cold while they watched Harris and his slate quickly seize control of the proceedings inside. Severe restrictions, such as only being permitted to enter two at a time, which she strongly denounced as a calculated effort to reduce attendance and influence the caucus's outcome. The atmosphere inside the building was equally divisive, according to Henyards. According to Camp, Napoleon Harris and his supporters quickly nominated themselves for the Democratic ticket and adjourned the meeting, which lasted only 7 minutes and was hurriedly planned. She claims that the short and strictly regulated meeting was intended to minimize transparency and prevent any meaningful debate or opposition. The meeting's pace and format have only strengthened Henyard's claims that the process was a sham meant to exclude her and her supporters. She claims that the caucus was a travesty of democratic principles, presenting a clear picture of voter disenfranchisement and backdoor dealings that put power before justice. Her critics dismiss her claims as inflated and self-serving, arguing that procedural rules and logistical concerns, rather than malicious intent, were to blame for the chaotic events. Henyard frames the incident as representative of a larger attempt to rig the election and silence the voices of her constituents. The fact that so many people were allegedly left standing outside while such important decisions were made inside has become the main focus of her criticism. A caucus version characterized by claims of disenfranchisement, many others in her neighborhood have been affected by the hurried judgments and exclusionary behaviors, which has increased public outrage over what happened that day. The political division in Gant Township has been further widened by the aftermath of the chaotic event, leaving voters divided and casting doubt on the process's integrity for Henyard and her allies. The caucus signifies more than just a personal failure. Henyard's story of what happened at the Homewood Flossmoor Park District Auditorium continues to reverberate as a stark indictment of a system she claims is biased against her and her supporters, guaranteeing that this contentious episode stays at the forefront of Thoron Township's political discourse despite a larger attack on democratic norms and community representation that they say cannot go unchallenged.
It's the right way. Illegal.
Tiffany Henyard's supporters have unleashed a barrage of criticism against Napoleon Harris, claiming that he planned the caucus to further his personal goals and ensure an unchallenged route to political supremacy. Henyard's ardent supporter Keith Price called the event the most egregious swindle he has ever seen, claiming that hundreds of qualified applicants were unfairly turned away based only on price, and that this exclusion was not an accident, but rather a deliberate attempt to undercut Henyard supporters and guarantee Harris's slate won without opposition. This feeling of disenfranchisement is shared by Henyard's camp, who insisted that the process was riddled with anomalies intended to silence dissenting opinions. Election attorney Carrie Kraft-Heffer supports these claims, as her examination of the caucus revealed serious procedural infractions that undermined the caucus legitimacy. Hare pointed out important errors like this. She also called attention to other anomalies that collectively compromised the transparency and fairness anticipated in a democratic process, such as the apparent failure to obtain signed affidavits from participants, a fundamental safeguard intended to confirm voter eligibility and preserve the legitimacy of such electoral exercises. Henyard camp's allegations that the caucus was not only defective, but purposefully set up to stifle criticism and deny her rights were strengthened by these revelations. Supporters and detractors contend that by eschewing these protections, the organizers put power consolidation ahead of guaranteeing a legal result. Price's fervent condemnation and Here's knowledgeable analysis have only heightened the controversy, with Henyard's supporters portraying the event as a grave illustration of systemic corruption that, for many, shows how powerful interests can bend the law to their will, leaving regular people disenchanted and doubtful of the election procedure. Supporters of Henyard perceive this as a wider assault on democratic values rather than just an attack on their candidate. Henyard supporters' frustration, rage, and sense of injustice have strengthened their resolve to oppose what they perceive to be a flagrant violation of justice. They believe that the caucus represents a dysfunctional system that requires reform, which further strengthens their resolve to hold the organizers responsible and advance a more equitable political structure.
People were getting let in at the proper time. We had a caucus, and people voted for us slated candidates to represent.
Tiffany Henyard's claims of voter suppression, according to some locals, may be a deliberate attempt to deflect criticism of her own shortcomings as a leader. Critics contend that Henyard had enough time to be ready for the caucus and make sure her slate complied with all rules, yet she didn't, casting doubt on her allegations of unfair treatment. Critics point out that abiding by the rules is not the same as suppressing the vote, and that Henyard's disregard for them shows a lack of organizational and leadership skills. The suspicion is heightened by claims that she misused township resources, including setting up voter transportation, who eventually failed to comply and were unable to attend the caucus. Her claims of prejudice and intentional exclusion are refuted by this practical flaw. presenting an image of disarray as opposed to systematic disenfranchisement. The lack of a finished slate was solely her fault, according to one vocal local resident, highlighting the fact that the procedural errors were the consequence of carelessness rather than collusion. Many observers find her story of being a victim lacking credibility because of her controversial past, which includes accusations of exploiting township assets for political and personal benefit. Her assertions of an unfair procedure also seem to support these complaints. Against the backdrop of her administrative difficulties, critics argue that Henyards should own her strategic and accountability failures rather than concentrating on procedural flaws, as her accusations don't help her detractors' trust in her leadership. The turmoil at the caucus is a sign of more serious problems with her leadership style, raising concerns about her capacity to fairly and transparently represent her constituents. These divergent opinions highlight how divisive Henyard's political career has been, with locals questioning her competence and moral character in the face of her outspoken accusations of being victimized. The caucus controversy has also reignited debates about Henyard's leadership style, which many view as divisive, while her opponents blame her for alienating the community with her confrontational rhetoric and questionable choices. Henyard supporters are still outspoken in their suspicion that her exclusion from the ballot is a part of a larger plot to unseat her. They claim that Harrison and his allies deliberately planned the caucus rolls to prevent her from running because they knew she would still be popular with some voter groups. But locals have pointed out that her frequent public outbursts, such as calling Harris a coward and accusing him of a hostile takeover, do little to inspire confidence in her ability to silence a leader who has done more for this community than anyone else. According to one supporter, the goal is not just the caucus. There is still uncertainty about whether Henyard has enough support to start a substantial writing campaign or whether the damage to her reputation has been too great. Harris has refuted these claims, claiming that the caucus was held in a lawful and equitable manner, that the procedure was followed, and that the results were as expected. Harris also defended the decision to hold a caucus, arguing that many Illinois townships have done so in the past, while residents of Thornton Township may not be familiar with caucuses because they haven't held. You will see that despite Harris' assurances that my people are here and will not go, I will win tonight if you do not earn the Democratic Party's candidacy tonight, as many other townships have done. The legal team for Henyard is preparing to challenge the results in court, arguing that the rules were applied arbitrarily and that her expulsion was intentional. The fallout from the caucus has been massive, and you want to end this the right way, unlawfully. Napoleon, but many community people have been cheering her dismissal for months as Henyard fights to reappear on the ballot. She serves as the mayor of Dolton and the supervisor of Thornton Township, and her suspected corruption has drawn criticism. And manner of leadership, she has been charged with embezzling public funds for lavish personal spending and politically motivated retaliation against her opponents. In one particularly damning report, it was revealed that Henyard spent over $30,000 on Amazon purchases using the village credit card in a single day, and she also spent roughly $100,000 on travel meals and other questionable expenses. Another study claims that some have even called for her resignation, calling her the first mayor of the United States. There are more disagreements under Henyard leadership. The village experienced a multi-million-dollar shortfall in its finances, and her tenure as mayor of Dolton has been marked by instability and malfunctioning. Lori Lafute, a former mayor of Chicago who was hired to investigate Dolan's financial situation, stated that the village's financial situation is dire. According to Lightfoot's initial assessment, the village's general fund balance dropped from more than $5 million to about $4 million. The investigation also found instances of police officers receiving excessive overtime pay, with one officer receiving more than twice their annual salary in just 2 years.